I got to put my own safety first. And even if that means, missing my friend's funeral, I mean, it's horrible, and I wish I could have been there, but that's what's been going on.
That is Warren, the young man calling himself the best friend of Nolan Wells, explaining why he could not even stand at Nolan's funeral. Put his recent photos next to the ones from just a few weeks earlier, and the weight is gone, the face is drawn, and the comment sections filled up overnight with one verdict: that a guilty conscience does this to a body, that whatever Warren is carrying is eating him from the inside out. In long sit-down interviews, Warren has described the two of them as more than best friends, as brothers who had known each other since elementary and middle school, got close all through Ocean Springs High, and stayed on the phone with each other constantly through their freshman year of college. He called Nolan the sweetest soul he ever met. But later on, Nolan's own family would quietly question just how close that bond really was, with the stepfather saying he was not that familiar with some of the people now claiming to be Nolan's closest friends, and that little sliver of daylight is something the internet grabbed and never let go of. By his own account, Warren did everything a friend is supposed to do in a nightmare. He has said he threw himself into the search the very next day, handed his phone over to police, and answered every single question investigators put to him from the first hour, cooperating fully from day one. He has also said, more than once, that he wishes they had never gone out on that boat at all, that Nolan would still be here if they had just stayed home. On what would have been Nolan's birthday, he and the other friends put out a statement calling Nolan the brightest of lights, whose memory would shine on in their hearts always. The pressure sitting on Warren right now is real and heavy, and he has not hidden it.
I mean, I've gotten thousands of death threats. My family's got thousands of death threats. I couldn't bring myself to go because, I got to put my own safety first. And even if that means, missing my friend's funeral.
Thousands of death threats, and some of them were serious enough that people got arrested, including recorded calls stuffed with racial slurs, son for a son type language, threats aimed at his family, and even bomb threats tied to the case, on top of in-person confrontations. He and the other friends have talked about living with their heads on a swivel, scared to show their faces in public, which is exactly why Warren could not bring himself to be at the funeral. His stepmother, who happens to be a local judge, had to temporarily shut down her own social media over safety fears for her kids before posting a timeline to try to fight the rumors with facts. And the family on the other side has caught heat too. Even Nolan's own mother has been dragged.
We've been degraded by the public. There's been questions about our parenting, our GoFundMe, this, that, and other. I've been called a racist. I am a healthcare provider.
So this whole thing is playing out in a climate where the mother gets attacked and the friends get threatened, and everybody has already picked a side. Warren did not just sit back and take it. He and two of the other friends who were on that trip, Jack Spitalo and Morgan Seymour, hired attorneys including Mississippi lawyer J. Tyler Cox and a New York defamation specialist named Edward Andrew Paltzik, vowed to come after the people spreading false claims, and even sent their lawyers out to Horn Island to look around for themselves. Warren's father launched a legal defense fundraiser titled A Stand with the Targeted Friends that pulled in more than $90,000 fast, not to fight a murder charge, because there is not one, but to defend against possible lawsuits and to go after the slander, the harassment, and the threats coming at his son. That is how deep this has gotten. 3 young men lawyering up and raising money just to survive the aftermath of a day at the beach. Even now, months down the line, no charges have been filed against Warren or any of the friends. The investigation is still wide open, and both sides are dug all the way into their own version of that day. On what would have been Nolan's 19th birthday, the friends joined a virtual prayer vigil put on by a national civil rights group, cameras on and microphones muted, and Reverend Al Sharpton acknowledged them on the live stream, while separate in-person vigils and family tributes marked the very same day. 2 families, 1 date, grieving the same young man from opposite sides of a wall of suspicion. And a big part of why the reaction ran this hot from the very first week has nothing to do with anybody's waistline.
Talking about the Deep South, we're talking about a very charged political time. We're talking about one black kid with several white kids. There is a scenario under which there could potentially be something to hide.
That framing has hung over the entire story from day one. The reason people cannot stop staring at Warren is not really the photos. It is everything the case itself keeps coughing up, one update at a time, and each new detail lands like a body blow. So let me lay those out, because there are a lot of them. Start with the autopsy, because that is where the suspicion really lives. The investigation is led by the Jackson County Sheriff's Office, with the State Department of Public Safety, the Marine Resources Department, and the National Park Park Service all in the mix, and the district attorney handling it, Angel Myers McElrath, has said the case is being run under standard Mississippi procedure. The official autopsy by the state medical examiner was completed within about a day of Nolan's body being recovered, but the findings got sealed pending a grand jury review. The DA says nearly every death in that county goes to a grand jury, and that holding the information back protects a fair process, not the truth, that the restraint is about not tainting witnesses or the case, rather than hiding anything, and the coroner said he was flat out instructed not to release anything. But to a public that already smelled something off, evidence you cannot see does not read like procedure, it reads like a lid getting screwed down tight. So the family stopped waiting and paid for their own answers, flying Nolan's body to Washington and bringing in a respected forensic pathologist, Dr. Roger A. Mitchell Jr. for an independent second autopsy on July 10th, one partly funded by former quarterback Colin Kaepernick and announced weeks later at the NAC National Convention. Those independent results only made the questions louder. They came back undetermined, with no bone fractures and no deep tissue injuries, but a patch of red discoloration, roughly 12 inches by 8 inches on the back of the skull, that the doctor could not fully explain. On top of that, the pathologist said he was boxed in because certain neck structures had already been kept by the first examiner, which meant he could not completely rule out an injury to the neck as a factor. He could not rule foul play in, and he could not rule it out either. He laid out a whole list of things still hanging: how and why Nolan even ended up in the water, what position his body was in, whether there was water in his airway, whether there was any neck injury or bleed on the brain, and what the toxicology would show. Then the head of the volunteer search team went on television and reached for one very specific word.
When I said the incident, something happened to make Nolan not be with us anymore. It appears as though it was a drowning. You know, there was a lot of rumors about him being brought back to the land 10 miles away and you know, brought back out there and dumped off. I don't believe any of that is true.
An incident, not an accident, an incident. Then there is the boat, and this is where the timeline gets strange. That same boat that called in a sinking emergency in the afternoon did not just limp straight home. Reporting on the GPS and the tow records shows it made several trips around the water that evening, one dock to another, then out to a boat launch, all after it had supposedly been taking on water. On the emergency call itself, which news outlets got hold of, you can hear somebody saying they are at the west tip of Horn Island, that the bilge pump quit, that they are sinking in about 30 feet of water, please come, and the caller says all 7 or so people on board are in good health. Then, inside of about 10 minutes, another boater helped out, the problem got called resolved, the tow was waved off, and records show the boat was pulled less than 3 miles before it went right back to normal. A boat that screamed it was going under was suddenly cruising all over the coast for hours. Then came the phone, which might be the single biggest reason people cannot let this go. Nolan's cell phone came back off that island without him, riding in the hands of his friends. And here is what his family says they found when they finally got it back and opened it up.
It wasn't even 24 hours, which is how long videos and pictures stay in Snapchat. And I was just like, that can't be. Like, I've seen Nolan.
A kid who documented every gathering, 2 whole Snapchat accounts, and nothing at all from the day he died. The family also said 2 different location apps were pointing at conflicting spots for that phone, one putting it out on the water and another putting it back on dry land, and they raised the possibility that data had been wiped. To them, that gap felt like erased history. Then there is the viral video. For a good stretch, people online were dead certain it showed Nolan in a heated argument on the island, yelling about his phone, but one of the other friends who was there, Trayston Shepard, stepped up and said the yelling voice in that clip was his own, from a completely separate argument with a stranger.
He says he's been receiving.
We did no wrong here, and we don't understand how we're getting so much hate behind it. We all cared and loved Nolan, and nobody wanted to see Nolan die. Nobody wanted to see his life be taken so short.
There is also the girl. The friends say Nolan stayed on the island because of a young woman he had just met, but when investigators found her, her account reportedly did not match theirs, with her believing he was leaving with the same friends he came with. Both versions cannot be all the way true, and that clash is one of the knots this case keeps snagging on. Some theories even went wild enough that the head of the search team had to knock them down, saying he did not believe the talk that Nolan's body was carried back to land and dumped, that wherever Nolan went into the water, he washed up close to that same spot, and he offered cadaver dogs for the boat to settle it, which then turned into a fight over who even had the authority to allow that. Through all of it, the family, working with civil rights attorney Benjamin Crump and with Reverend Al Sharpton speaking alongside them at press conferences, kept pressing hard, sending preservation letters, running a tip line, and pushing for a joint examination of the phone with their own experts in the room. Crump kept hammering one line especially, asking what teenager on earth leaves their phone behind if they really plan to stay out there, and framing the family family's doubts in a long history of black families not trusting how their cases get handled. A large reward went up for real information. The toxicology results are reportedly finished but have not been released. And through every bit of it, the family keeps their eyes locked on the one thing that never changes for them.
The only question that we have is what happened to our son. That is the only question. We have
to feel the full weight of all this, you have to know who Nolan actually was, because he was not a stranger. He was somebody a whole town loved. Nolan Xavier Wells was born on August 19, 2007, and grew up in Ocean Springs, Mississippi, a coastal town just east of Biloxi, and he lived there his whole life. He graduated Ocean Springs High with the class of 2025 and earned a football scholarship to Southwest Mississippi Community College, where he played wide receiver wearing number 16, listed at 6'1", and around 185 pounds. He was a three-sport athlete in high school, and over his varsity football career he pulled in 66 catches for 759 yards and 10 touchdowns, all region twice, but the people who coached him kept saying his character was louder than his stats. His high school coach told People magazine that Nolan was the kind of person who wanted to see the good in everyone, and made others feel accepted. He was raised Catholic, baptized as a child at a church in Moss Point, and one of his favorite verses was Colossians 4:2. About staying devoted, watchful, and thankful. Beyond the field, he worked behind the camera for his high school's media program. His mother is a nurse practitioner. His father trained him with beach drills and film study and nicknamed him Mr. Cool Hands, and he was close with a younger brother who played the same position on the field. He came from a big, tight family, 5 siblings and a web of grandparents, aunts, uncles, and a godmother, all rooted in that same corner of Mississippi. At the funeral, his mother shared that Nolan already dreamed of being a father to 3 daughters someday, and had even picked their names, Sophia, Charlotte, and Olivia. Hundreds of people packed that funeral. It was led in part by that same reverend, and his mother stood up and challenged the whole room to be like Nolan, in a world that can feel dark. The family has talked about starting a foundation in his name so his memory does not fade. His parents had also drilled one rule into him hard, the rule this entire case keeps circling back to.
We always taught him to, if you go with a group, you stay with a group.
Safety in numbers, taught to him on purpose, because they were raising a young black man in the South, and they wanted him back through the front door every single time. The night before the trip, on July 3rd, Nolan cooked salmon for the family, hugged and kissed his mother goodbye, and headed out to stay with friends, and that was the last time she saw him. The next morning started perfectly. GPS data from the Marine Resources Department shows the boat Nolan was on, leaving a private dock around 9:56 in the morning and reaching Horn Island around 11:14. Horn Island is a beautiful, brutal place. A federally protected barrier island miles off the coast with no staff, no water, no shelter, and no reliable way to communicate. Reachable only by private boat and packed on that holiday with a few hundred people, a lot of them high school classmates treating it like one last hurrah before everybody scattered. By every account, Nolan was having a good day out there, at one point talking to a girl he had just met. Warren says the last time he personally saw Nolan was around 3 in the afternoon, laughing, looking completely fine. Then, in the middle of the afternoon, the boat started taking on water because a bilge pump failed, and the water in that exact stretch is no place to get caught out.
The rip current is very bad in that northwestern portion. We call it the washing machine, actually.
In the middle of that emergency, the group says they begged Nolan to get on the boat and leave, and that he refused, wanting to stay with the girl and ride back later with somebody else. The GPS shows the boat pulling away at 4:31 in the afternoon, without him, his phone, and his keys still on board. By 11 that night, when nobody had heard from him, Warren says he texted around first, and when no one had seen Nolan, he tracked down his mother's number and made the call no friend ever wants to make, telling her not to panic before reaching out to the Coast Guard. His mother started calling everyone she could and tracking his phone, and around midnight the parents filed a missing person report. 2 days of searching by the Coast Guard, the National Park Service, and volunteer crews with air support followed, with a command post set up at a boat launch and Nolan's own mother going out to the water to look for her son. On the morning of July 6th, around 8:45, a park ranger found Nolan's body along the shoreline near the northwest tip of the island, identified through dental records, wearing only his blue swim trunks, which matched exactly what he had on when he was last photographed. The family was brought to the coroner's office in Pascagoula, and while officials said early there was no reason to believe it was not Nolan, they still waited on formal confirmation. The sheriff said no obvious signs of foul play, drowning suspected, pointing at those savage currents, though an early description of the body as fully clothed caused a stir until it got cleared up that it just meant his trunks. And one of the friends said it as simply and as painfully as anybody could.
We all cared and loved Nolan, and nobody wanted to see Nolan die.
So here is where it all stands. The questions keep stacking up, the accounts keep colliding, and the real answers are still locked away, sealed until a grand jury sees them, with the phone not fully examined and the toxicology still under wraps. Until the day that grand jury finally speaks, the whole internet is going to keep its eyes fixed on Warren Hudson, reading his face and his frame for an answer that only the evidence can actually give. A young man is gone, his family is still waiting on the truth, and nobody watching is looking away. Rest in peace to Nolan Wells. If you have been following this case, share this with somebody who still has questions about that day, because the more eyes stay on Nolan's story, the harder it becomes for the truth to stay sealed.